The challenge. The massive amphitheater of the Galactic Union fell silent as the holographic display illuminated the central stage. Representatives from over 200 species watched as High Counselor Six Fall, a towering insectoid with iridescent eyes, gestured toward the swirling vortex displayed in perfect three-dimensional detail. The quantum nexus remains impassable, Zixfall announced, mandibles clicking with finality. For the 12th time in our collective history, our greatest minds have concluded that constructing a stable gateway through this region is theoretically and practically impossible. The quantum nexus, a vast, churning storm of temporal distortions and spatial anomalies, had blocked the most direct route between the two major arms of the galaxy for millennia. Travel between these regions required months-long detours around the nexus, severely limiting trade and cultural exchange. In the upper gallery, Commander Elena Reyes of the Earth Cooperative shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Humans had only been part of the Galactic Union for 26 years, newcomers by every measure. Most species still regarded them with a mixture of curiosity and condescension, like precocious children who had stumbled into a sophisticated adult conversation. Beside her, Science Director Amir Khan whispered, "They've barely considered our proposals." Elena's eyes narrowed. Humanity's history was filled with impossible achievements, splitting the atom, reaching the moon with primitive technology, developing faster than light travel after just a century of powered flight. If there was one thing humans excelled at, it was refusing to accept limitations. "Honored Council," Elena called out, rising to her feet. Her voice, amplified by the chamber's acoustics, echoed throughout the amphitheater. "The Earth Cooperative requests recognition." A ripple of murmurs spread through the gathered delegates. The High Counselor's compound eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of mild surprise. "The human delegation is recognized," Zixfall said, making no effort to hide the skepticism in their translated voice. Elena walked to the speaker's platform, her straight-backed military posture and the simple blue uniform of Earth's Space Force standing out among the elaborate robes and biosuits of the other delegates. At 42, her dark hair held traces of silver at the temples, and her face carried the weathered look of someone who had faced difficult challenges throughout her life. "With respect, the Earth Cooperative would like to propose an alternative approach to the Nexus problem," Elena said, her voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of conviction. The Voxmeral representative, a crystalline being known for its computational brilliance, vibrated in what translated as derisive laughter. "Species with technologies thousands of years more advanced than yours have failed repeatedly. What could humans possibly contribute to this challenge?" Elena smiled thinly. "A different perspective. Humans specialize in achieving what others consider impossible. We request permission to attempt construction of a quantum gateway." The chamber erupted in overlapping discussions, some amused, others outraged at the presumption. High Counselor Zixfall raised all four arms for silence. "Your species' confidence borders on arrogance," the High Counselor said. "The quantum nexus destabilizes all known construction materials. The temporal fluctuations render calibration impossible. The energy requirements alone would bankrupt your entire cooperative." "We're aware of the challenges," Elena replied. "We simply believe they are solvable problems, not immutable laws." Admiral Direxa of the Halaxian Confederation, a reptilian species known for their strategic minds, leaned forward. "What would Earth require for this attempt?" "Access to the Nexus border, non-interference from other species, and if we succeed, Earth receives priority transit rights for 20 cycles," Elena answered promptly. The High Counselor conferred briefly with the Inner Council before responding. "This request is most irregular. However, as the likelihood of success approaches zero, granting permission costs us little." Their mandibles clicked in what humans had learned was amusement. "You have one standard cycle, 3 Earth years. If you fail, Earth will contribute triple resources to the next official attempt and publicly acknowledge the impossibility of the task." "Agreed," Elena said without hesitation. "We'll begin preparations immediately." As she left the chamber, a tall, serpentine being with mottled blue scales fell into step beside her. Ambassador Steth of the Draxian hegemony was one of the few non-humans who had developed a genuine respect for Earth's capabilities. That was either brilliant or suicidal. As Steth observed, voice a melodic hiss. The Council has essentially written this off as human hubris. Elena smiled. They don't understand what drives us. When someone says something's impossible, humans hear a challenge. You have someone in mind for this project? Yes, Elena replied, but one person who might just pull this off. 3 weeks later, Elena stood in a sprawling workshop orbiting Earth's moon. Complex holographic schematics floated in the air while robotic arms assembled and disassembled prototypes in the background. In the center of the controlled chaos stood Dr. Mira Patel, completely absorbed in modifying what appeared to be a miniature version of a quantum field generator. Mira was in her mid-30s, with intelligent eyes that analyzed everything around her. Her hands moved with precision as she recalibrated microscopic components, so focused that she hadn't acknowledged her visitor. Dr. Patel, Elena said loudly. Mira didn't look up. I heard you volunteer humanity for a suicide mission. Very inspirational, Commander. I volunteered you for a suicide mission, Elena corrected. There's a difference. That got Mira's attention. She straightened, revealing the petite frame and sharp features that now examined Elena with open skepticism. The Quantum Nexus Project, Mira said, wiping her hands on her lab coat. You're serious. Dead serious. The Union gave us 1 cycle. Mira laughed, though there was little humor in it. No one can build a stable gateway through that chaotic mess. The temporal distortions alone would tear apart any conventional structure before it's even half built. That's what everyone says. Because it's true. Mira gestured expansively. The physics are well established. The quantum nexus exhibits variable timeline drift of up to 0.72 seconds per objective second. No material can maintain structural integrity under those conditions. Elena picked up a small model ship from a nearby table, one of Mira's early designs that had revolutionized interstellar propulsion. Remember when the Vox Merrill said humans would never develop quantum slip capability for vessels under 400 meters? You proved them wrong within 6 months. A flicker of pride crossed Mira's face. That was different. Was it? Elena placed the model back carefully. I've started assembling a team. Dr. Kyoto from Cambridge. He's been working on temporal stabilization fields. Captain Rodriguez for logistics and station command. And Jensen for materials engineering. She's been developing those adaptive metamaterials for extreme environments. Despite herself, Mira was beginning to look interested. She walked to her main computer terminal and pulled up a file. I've actually been playing with some theoretical models for quantum-stable architectures, she admitted. Just thought experiments, you understand. Elena smiled, knowing Mira was already hooked. When can you start? You realize this is probably a spectacular waste of resources, or humanity's greatest achievement. Think of the possibilities if we succeed. Direct access between the galactic arms would transform exploration, trade, everything. Mira tapped her fingers on the console, thinking. The quantum stabilization challenges alone would take. She paused, eyes suddenly distant in the way Elena recognized as Mira having an insight. Wait, what if we don't try to fight the temporal distortions? What if we work with them instead? Meaning? Everyone's been trying to build static structures that resist the nexus effects. What if we create something that flows with them instead? A dynamic, responsive gateway. Elena saw the familiar intensity building in Mira's eyes. So you'll do it. Mira was already pulling up new schematics, her mind racing ahead. When do we leave? 3 days. We're establishing a research station at the Nexus border. The Draxians are providing one of their advanced construction platforms. Mira looked surprised. The Draxians, they rarely share technology. Ambassador, as Steth pulled some strings, said he's curious to see what humans can accomplish when properly motivated by impossible odds. Well, Mira said with a growing smile, we wouldn't want to disappoint him. 2 months later, the newly christened research station, Prometheus, hung at the very edge of the quantum nexus, its reinforced observation dome offering a breathtaking view of the swirling, iridescent chaos that had defied taming for millennia. The station hummed with activity as the last of the specialized equipment was calibrated. Mira stood in the main laboratory with Dr. Hiroshi Kyoto, a serene man in his 60s whose calm demeanor belied one of the most innovative minds in temporal physics. They watched as Sarah Jensen supervised the installation of her experimental metamaterial panels that would form the basis for their first prototype. The council has sent observers, Kyoto mentioned quietly, representatives from 6 species. They're expecting us to fail spectacularly. Of course they are, Mira replied with a shrug. That's what makes this interesting. I found something curious in the Union archives. Kyoto continued. 3,000 years ago, the precursors, the first known spacefaring civilization, were studying the nexus before they mysteriously vanished. The records are fragmentary, but they appear to have approached the problem differently than everyone since. Mira's eyes narrowed with interest. How so? They weren't trying to resist the quantum fluctuations. They were attempting to harmonize with them somehow. Before Mira could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. The structure shuddered as a wave of temporal energy from the nexus washed over it. All systems holding, Captain Rodriguez called from the command center. But that was just a minor fluctuation. The major phase shifts will be much more intense. Mira walked to the observation dome and gazed out at the nexus. Everyone said building a gateway through it couldn't be done. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy had tried and failed for thousands of years. Perfect, she said softly. I've always hated easy problems. Behind her, the team continued their preparations, unaware that deep within the chaotic heart of the nexus, something ancient was stirring, awakened by their presence after eons of dormancy. The impossible made possible. 6 months into the project, Research Station Prometheus no longer resembled the pristine facility it had been. Scorch marks decorated bulkheads from temporal feedback incidents. Makeshift repairs covered equipment that had aged decades in seconds when temporal waves had washed over them. The human crew moved with the determined efficiency of people who had faced repeated failure but refused to accept defeat. Mira stood before the station's main viewport, studying the twisted remains of their third prototype gateway anchors floating in space. The nexus had torn the structure apart as if it were made of paper. That's the third complete failure, observed Kate Trix, the Voxmeral observer, the crystalline being vibrated with frequencies that translated as smug satisfaction. My species has calculated a 99.97% probability that this project is fundamentally impossible. Then we'll work with the 0.03%, Mira replied without turning. The council representatives are drafting a preliminary report concluding this endeavor is, as predicted, doomed to failure. Kitrix continued. Mira finally turned from the viewport, dark circles under her eyes, but determination still burning in her gaze. Tell them to save their bandwidth. We're just getting started. Dr. Kyoto entered the observation deck, tablet in hand. Mira, you need to see this data from the last test. The temporal distortion didn't destroy our prototype randomly. There's a pattern in how the nexus responded. As K-Trix glided away, Kyoto projected a holographic display showing energy flows from the failed test. Look here and here, he said, highlighting 2 points where energy had surged through their prototype. The nexus doesn't just disrupt structures. It responds to them, almost like an immune system, Mira finished, leaning forward with renewed interest. It's not random destruction. It's a response to what it perceives as an intrusion. Sarah Jensen joined them, her normally neat appearance now disheveled from working 36 hours straight. That matches what I've been seeing in the metamaterial response patterns. The materials don't fail at a molecular level until after the nexus energy patterns shift to target them specifically. Mira paced the deck, mind racing. We've been thinking about this all wrong. Everyone has. We're not just building in a hostile environment. We're interacting with a responsive system. Are you suggesting the nexus is alive? Kyoto asked cautiously. Not alive in a biological sense, but perhaps a self-organizing system with emergent properties, Mira replied. What if instead of forcing our way through, we establish a dialogue? Captain Rodriguez looked skeptical. How do you communicate with a quantum anomaly? The same way we communicate with anything unknown, Mira said. We establish patterns, observe responses, and adapt. She turned to Jensen. Sarah, can your metamaterials be reconfigured to emit quantum resonance patterns? Jensen considered this. Theoretically, yes. We could use the quantum entanglement properties to create synchronized harmonic patterns. Dr. Patel, interrupted Ambassador Steth as he entered the observation deck. The Galactic Council is requesting a progress report. The Halaxian Admiral has specifically asked whether Earth is ready to admit defeat. Mira smiled for the first time in days. Tell them we've had a breakthrough. We're not fighting the Nexus anymore. We're going to dance with it. Over the next 4 months, the team worked relentlessly to develop what Mira called quantum resonance architecture, a system of interlocking gateway components that didn't try to resist the Nexus's temporal fluctuations, but instead synchronized with them, creating a sympathetic pattern that the Nexus wouldn't recognize as foreign. The alien observers watched with increasing curiosity as the humans rebuilt their prototype using principles that contradicted established Union engineering doctrine. Instead of rigid stability, they designed for controlled flexibility. Rather than maximum durability, they created components that could absorb and redirect energy. This approach is counter to all established quantum engineering principles. Catrix observed as they prepared for their 4th major test. You are designing for failure. No, Kyoto corrected gently. We're designing for harmony. There's a difference. When the 4th test produced a gateway anchor that survived for 7 minutes, longer than any previous attempt by any species, even the most skeptical observers began paying closer attention. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, when the station was hit by the most powerful temporal storm recorded since their arrival. As alarms blared and systems struggled to compensate, Mira noticed something unusual in the sensor readings. The storm isn't random, she said suddenly, studying the data patterns. There's a fractal recursion in the temporal waves, a mathematics to the chaos. Working feverishly through the night, Mira and Kyoto discovered what countless alien scientists had missed. The quantum nexus operated on principles similar to Earth's weather systems, with complex but ultimately predictable patterns that could be modeled if you had the right approach. It's beautiful, Mira whispered as their simulation showed the underlying order within the apparent chaos. Everyone's been looking at the nexus as an obstacle to overcome. They never considered it might be a natural phenomenon with its own elegant logic. Armed with this new understanding, the team redesigned their gateway architecture completely. Instead of a static structure, they created what Mira called a temporal symphony, a gateway that would constantly reconfigure itself in precise harmony with the Nexus's rhythms. Construction of the full-scale prototype began immediately. As word spread through the Galactic Union of the humans' continued efforts, more observer ships arrived. No one believed they would succeed, but the spectacle of human determination had become the greatest show in the galaxy. 2 years and 7 months into their 3-year window, with over a dozen partial failures behind them, the Prometheus team prepared for their final attempt. The new gateway design, a series of interlocking rings that pulsed with energy in complex, shifting patterns, extended into the edge of the nexus. All resonance generators synchronized, Jensen reported from her station. Metamaterial harmony at optimal levels. Temporal compensators online and responding, added Kyoto. The gateway is dancing with the nexus fluctuations exactly as modeled. Mira stood at the command console, aware of the historical significance of this moment. Behind her, observers from 23 species watched in silence, including 3 members of the High Council who had arrived to witness what they assumed would be humanity's admission of defeat. "Initiate final sequence," Mira ordered. "Let's open the door." Energy surged through the gateway structure, each ring illuminating in sequence. As the power reached critical levels, the familiar destructive response from the Nexus began to build. But this time, the gateway shifted its resonance pattern in perfect counterpoint, absorbing and redirecting the energy rather than resisting it. For a breathless moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, at the center of the massive ring structure, the chaotic energies of the Nexus began to calm, forming a perfect circle of absolute stillness, a window through the impassable barrier. "Pro-telemetry coming through," Rodriguez announced, voice tight with excitement. "We have stable readings from the other side of the Nexus." Mira allowed herself a small smile as she turned to face the alien observers. "Gateway stabilization achieved. Shall we send through the first ship?" The automated test vessel, no larger than a shuttle, entered the gateway and disappeared into the stillness at its center. For 90 agonizing seconds, there was no signal. Then the communication system chimed. "Test vessel has emerged on the far side of the Nexus," Rodriguez confirmed. "Journey time: 94 seconds for a distance that would normally take 3 months to traverse. All systems functioning normally." The observation deck remained silent as the enormity of what they had just witnessed sank in. The impossible had been achieved. High Counselor Zixfall stepped forward, all 4 arms raised in the formal gesture of acknowledgement. "The Union acknowledges Earth's achievement. The quantum gateway is hereby recognized as a triumph of engineering and perseverance." Ambassador S. Teth approached Mira with what humans had learned to recognize as a smile on his serpentine features. "You have changed the galaxy today, Dr. Paddle. Many species will reconsider what they believe to be impossible." "That's the thing about impossible," Mira replied. "It's just a word we use until someone proves otherwise." In the years that followed, the quantum gateway, soon expanded to accommodate vessels of all sizes, transformed galactic civilization. Trade routes that once took months could now be traversed in hours. Cultural exchange flourished between previously distant regions, and Earth, once dismissed as an upstart newcomer, gained a reputation throughout the Union for turning impossibilities into achievements. When asked how humans had succeeded where so many advanced civilizations had failed, Mira's answer became famous throughout the galaxy. "We didn't know enough to know it couldn't be done. Where others saw immutable laws, we saw problems waiting for solutions. That's the gift of humanity. We don't accept limitations, we see them as invitations." The Galactic Union formally amended its archives to include a new principle, unofficially known as the human axiom. The declaration that something is impossible should be treated not as a limitation, but as a challenge awaiting the right perspective. Deep within the now stable heart of the quantum nexus, the ancient consciousness that had observed countless failed attempts across millennia finally rested. After eons of solitude, it had found a species that understood its language of patterns and harmonies, not conquerors, but dance partners who had learned to move in rhythm with the cosmos itself. In the end, the greatest human achievement wasn't building what couldn't be built, it was showing the galaxy a new way of seeing.